Kate Silverton, thank you so much for joining me today. It is an honour to have you here. Can we begin just by asking you about what your own menopause experience has been like? Because there's quite a story,
quite a backstory.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know whether you won't have already shared with everybody how we met over a lunch and had this very long conversation, and that was it. Now we're here, and I'm very grateful for it. So the backstory, I'm going to try and keep it succinct, but in my 20s, I had a twisted ovarian cyst, and that ruptured, and I nearly died, and I lost my left ovary and fallopian tube. And at the time, I still remember, I was about 26, 27, and the doctor sort of said, you better get on with having children because, this may impact your fertility. And I wasn't even then seriously dating, so it just all felt very scary. And it wasn't until my 30s that I then met my husband. And I then have had really sort of gynecological issues, shall we say. I was put on HRT patches when I was in my 20s, prior to the ovarian cyst, actually, because I'd had really severe PMS. So that I went on as part of a trial. And then...
did it help?
It did, actually. It did. Yeah, I was really struggling because my period was coming every 3 weeks, and then I was having these massive symptoms. And so that really did. Then we struggled for many years to conceive because I met Mike at 35 and we didn't get married till we were 40 because we spent much of that time having IVF, which for us didn't work. And then I will get to the menopause bit, but sort of setting a backstory of I've always had really sort of these gynecological challenges, shall we put it like that. I was then extraordinarily gifted to be conceived naturally with my children at 41 and 43, which is a whole other podcast. And then found myself in that same decade with another ovarian cyst and sitting in front of the amazing Dr. Alan Farthing, who then advised me. And when he went through my medical history, that led to me having my right ovary then removed. And I went into menopause overnight, medically induced menopause.
Yeah, surgical
menopause. And I think it was all such a shock. And I know we're going to get to this because this is where our lunch went quite in depth, that I just sort of survived it. I survived it. But I had 72 hours where we hadn't got me on HRT, and having had that surgically induced menopause, where I was in this, and it was horrific. It was really awful. I still sort of remember that feeling. And so then I was put on HRT because obviously not having any ovaries. But what's interesting to me now is that I didn't really research it in a way that I would anything else that was really, it was just this sort of maybe an emergency situation. And I had 2 very young children. And so I found myself on HRT and actually feeling, stabilised. And then we went travelling, and I used to find it a bit of a faff, the whole slapping on of the gel, and I'm not one for being methodical. Let's put it like that. I wasn't. I'm much better now, but I wasn't. And when we were away, the prescription ran out, and we were in Costa Rica, and I thought, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to try, because I'd had this, there was a sort of messaging around actually maybe you'll come off and your body will then sort of gradually go into where it's meant to be at. So I thought, well, why don't we give that a go? Because it's a bit of a faff, this gel thing. And so I came off, and for a number of months, no difference. This is all great. This is all good.
For a number of months, you felt okay?
A number of months. And then I had the beautiful sweats. Oh.
Really? It took that long to start?
I think so. I mean, again, maybe I think it was because we got back to the UK. So maybe it was 2 months,
right.
maybe, 2.5 months. I remember because it was that autumn period, and I remember going across Kew Bridge and, oh my dear Lord, thinking this is not normal. To be kind of swimming in my own sweat across the bridge.
No. Yeah.
And so that continued. And I do know we're going to get to this, Naomi, that there was a sense in me of just push on through. Did
you realise what it was?
Yes. I was now this is what everyone's been talking about. My goodness, and I'm lying there in bed just swimming around in my own sweat and going, gosh, this is pretty full on. And I've always been quite curious about how my body responds to things. So I was observing it and just going, this is the menopause. This is what happens. And it went on for quite a bit. And then it did seem to dissipate.
Right.
And so I thought I cracked it. I thought, that was it. I've pushed on through. I'm out the other side. All is well. And to be fair, for a number of, and it was only really relatively recently. So we moved house. I've moved out of London, got the kids established in a new school and all that mummying stuff that we do. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm low. And actually, I don't feel low. That's not me. I'm really low. I'm really tired. I'm snappy. This is not who I want to be. Snapping at the kids and just thinking, this is not, I'm not feeling good. And so go to the GP, my first appointment, this poor man. And cutting a long story short there, I ended up in tears in the doctor's surgery, finally admitting defeat, Naomi. Finally admitting
is that how you felt? Did you feel like you were giving in?
This is feeling vulnerable is not in my vocabulary.
Right.
I don't do vulnerable. Well, I do now. I do, but it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice. So this stoicism that many of us may recognise when we're looking after everybody else and sort of not allowing ourselves to be showing any weakness or vulnerability, and maybe even thinking there's something wrong with me and I should just put up and shut up.
Oh, shame.
Yeah. And so actually I can thoroughly recommend anybody having a good little cry in front of your GP as a starting point of admitting that things are not as you would wish for them to be.
Did you go with an expectation of what you would like them to offer?
First thing was to check my bloods, because I thought, I go into, okay, this is a problem that needs to be solved. And let's just see what's going on before we take the next steps. And then I went back to see him, and he said, he in fact phoned me, and I thought, oh my God, what have they found?
Oh gosh.
And it was so low, the estrogen. And you looked at me at lunch and you just went, I don't even need to know, Kate, what your estrogen level was, because I said it was shocking. And you went, yeah, no shit, basically. You looked at me as if I was like a 5. I mean, you didn't do it in a nasty way. You were like, yeah. And I felt suddenly like this.
In the nicest possible way.
That you were gorgeous. It was my stuff of feeling like, how naive of me. Because you were like, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Oh God, of course. So I'd like to pick up on that, if we may, Doctor.
You'd had your factory taken out, hadn't you? You'd had, your ovaries were no longer there making it.
Yeah. So I hadn't joined those particular dots up until I met you, which is bonkers, isn't it? Really.
Well, not if it hadn't been explained to you. Like, if it's only really when you know that the vast majority of your estrogen comes from your ovaries, and therefore, if your ovaries are no longer there, you're not going to have any estrogen. I think one probably needs that kind of explaining. Otherwise, you might just think, especially because the rhetoric from the olden days was you only need your ovaries to make babies, not because it makes they make hormones. So I think there is.
You're absolutely right, and I'm sure you can never say that enough. That message, because, I think it's. I did feel a bit. You think, goodness, how have I not joined those particular dots up? But also, when you do go in for anything that's medical, you are in a state of shock, and this is where we need that holding on the other side. And I guess I didn't have that because it was just like, right, stick a patch on, stick the gel on and get on with it. So that lovely space that actually I had with you over that lunch was to go, that's what happened.
Right.
And no wonder I ended up where I was back in the GP surgery, actually not feeling great.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I'd like that message repeated over and over for anybody else who may be, in that position. Yeah.
And so what happened next?
So, well, we're still not quite. So what happened next? And I guess, again, maybe I'm indicative in as much as my lovely GP saw the results and then said, well, he actually then still gave me the option and just sort of said, well, what would you like? Would you like to go back on HRT? And again, I didn't feel equipped to make that answer, except I did feel instinctively like, actually, this sounds like it probably would be a good idea. There is a real disconnect. And I'm going to take it upon myself to say, well, I'm all about research, so I should be doing some of the research myself. But then we do go to our GPs to get information. And I felt, again, that I was having to make that decision and I didn't feel fully equipped to do so. And because also there was a part of me thinking, well, is it hormonal? Or maybe it's just exhaustion because we've moved house and everything. So you still have the question mark. But I thought, no, it feels like I need this, and based on these bloods. So I've gone on a patch, which I knew I should have brought with me, but you'll probably know which one. It's kind of like a pale pink and blue little package. Is
it the Everel Conti?
Yes. Yeah. And so is that the one with estrogen and progesterone?
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not taking testosterone. I've just got the estrogen, and I know we're going to have a chat about that. But and I felt better. Now, again, how much of that is placebo immediately? But then I think you said to me, I did text you and say, I'm feeling really good almost immediately. And you went, yeah, it can happen quite quickly. I did feel the results.
Yeah.
And I felt relief. I just felt a little bit lifted. Just a little bit lifted. Now, where I am today is, my question is, how do I know that I'm getting enough? And it feels very subjective. Could I have a little bit more? Would I be even more up? Or am I about right? So I find that puzzling around this whole thing with menopause and the information that we are or not given. And again, I take responsibility for myself thinking, well, I should look at this. But then I guess that's why I spoke to you at lunch and shared with you, thinking, well, I might actually get some answers here. So,
but you can't, I think they're brilliant questions, because you're aware of the fact that there are different doses. So how does anybody know that they're on the right amount? You've still got your uterus, haven't you? That's why you're on the...
Yes.
Yeah. So the dose that you've been put on is a very normal kind of moderate dose of estrogen, and plus you've got the progesterone that you absorb through the skin. So it's the easiest way of delivering HRT simply and without kind of anything that you've got to remember to take every day. And it's a really good product. Estrogen via the skin is the safest way of delivering it. The progesterone that's in that patch is a good one at controlling bleeding. And we normally say that if you are feeling yourself, then that's really all you need to know that you're on the right dose. If you've not got side effects, then, and you're not still feeling like there's just something else that's not quite right, or that's still missing, or that you want to change, or you want to see if you can feel that something else, then there's a really strong argument for not rocking the boat. It is certainly possible to go up in dose. It's harder with the product that you're on because it only comes in that strength. So you'd have to start thinking about whether you split out the estrogen and the progesterone into a different products, or it's a bit more complicated, but certainly feasible. So that's why it's so individual, and every single woman will feel differently, and maybe some women would want to try something else, or they want to see if there's something like just a little bit better, and others just like, no, I'm fine, I'm not going to rock the boat, I'm good as I am.
So what would the options be then? So you'd separate it out. Would that be a pessary for progesterone, or
just an oral tablet? So you can take the estrogen patch, the estrogen patch on its own, and then just take a continuous oral progesterone. It's called Utrogestan, and it can be good because it can help with sleep. So particularly women that struggle with sleep, it can be a really nice extra thing to do. But it's something that you've got to remember to do every day. Some people use combinations of the patch that you're on, like they cut them in half and go up. So use 1.5, and it's off license. But we do sometimes do that if that's a product that they particularly like. There's Mirena coils that you can use for the progestogen component. So you just have a patch and then have the coil, so you don't then have to remember. But there's huge pros and cons for using that as well. You've got to have it fitted, and some women really don't like the idea of having it fitted. But then when it's in, you've got it for 5 years. So there's all sorts of different methods depending on how somebody feels and what their own preferences are.
And that should be something that GPs can guide women through, is it? Or do you have to then go and seek a specific consultation?
It's something that most GPs should be pretty comfortable doing, that's changing from a combined patch to a separate patch, and progesterone is fairly standard practice. Counselling about the use of a Mirena coil again would be pretty standard practice. But for older doctors who haven't had that experience or that training, you can imagine that. There's a lot to know, and it's easy. I do that all day and every day, so it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, of course they should know, but I don't have to deal with all the, diabetics and the high blood pressure and the infections and the, all the other things. It's all top of my mind. But if this is something that you do once a week, it'll be different to have fresh in your head. But that's not complicated. Kind of menopause management. We think of kind of complicated menopause management of the women who have persistent symptoms despite all manner of HRT regimes or complicated past medical histories or side effects that you just can't control. That would be where you would definitely expect to see a specialist.
But the message I'm hearing is that if you're still not feeling in sort of balance, as it were, that it might be worth pursuing to try a bit of tweaking. It sounds like it's an inexact science, but
yeah. Somebody said yesterday, an alchemy. It's just, it really is, it's an art. It's not science, because with every blood test under the sun, you still sometimes have women sat in front of you who where the clinical picture does not match what they're taking, what their blood results are. And it can be, there are so many different things to take into account. Lifestyle can make a massive impact on symptoms, but also on how products work. If you've got somebody that's swimming every day, you've got somebody that has really hot bars, if you've got somebody that uses a gel and they put the active wear straight over the top and don't think about how long to let it dry, things change seasonally. So somebody's HRT might be working brilliantly when they've been wearing shorts in the summer, and then in the winter they've been wearing tight fitting clothing, and then all of a sudden their HRT is not working, and you have to kind of go into all of these questions that unless you've got a lot of experience, you can't expect a GP to be able to work that out. Because they just haven't got the time or the depth of experience. You wanted to talk about testosterone. Did you want to talk about testosterone?
Yeah, I guess the question is it beneficial, and should I be taking it? This is not a medical question, but what are I'm kind of curious as to why my GP didn't, but I don't know whether I am due to go back to see him for my kind of follow-up. So I guess that might be a question that he was going to ask me anyway, but.
He may have done it. The testosterone replacement tends to not be in the kind of average remit of most GPs unless they've kind of taken a special interest. And testosterone replacement, it's a subject that is talked about more and more, and opinion is definitely divided. The indications at the moment, and the guidance at the moment says that we should be using testosterone replacement in women who have a distressingly low libido, who are already established on HRT, on estrogen replacement, and it's proven that they have low serum levels with blood tests. There is a strong kind of conversation that testosterone helps with other things. Things like get up and go, energy, joie de vivre, motivation, power, strength, those kind of things. But we don't have the data to prove it yet. And we've got some anecdotal evidence from women who've tried it that really, really like it. And also a lot of women try it and they don't notice any benefit. So it's another one of those we don't really know, and some women really want to try it because we know that testosterone declines with age. We know that from your 20s throughout your remaining years, your testosterone levels drop, but we're just not 100% sure as to what function it plays. I'm fairly convinced that it's got a significant role. It's a drug of abuse in sports, and we know that it has benefits on performance. Otherwise, they wouldn't ban it. And we know that men who lose their testosterone when they have certain types of cancer treatment, they feel it. But we just don't know enough at the moment. If you're enjoying this conversation so far, please do press the follow button on whatever platform you're listening on. Please do share it with a friend who you think would benefit too. So you've had a significant career change from journalist to child therapist. Can you talk us through how that happened? And
my academic background is in child psychology, and I'd always been fascinated with that area, that field. And then
did you study that at university?
Yes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And it was really becoming a mum. Obviously, it had taken a very long time to become a parent, and I'd been involved with children's charities in that time before even becoming a mum. So I had access to all these incredible neuroscientists and psychiatrists and psychotherapists, and I'd been doing my own personal psychotherapy as well. So this lovely voyage of learning. And then when my children were very young, and I'd go in going, well, why are they doing that? And what's going on here? And they'd be explaining the science, and a lot of it involved the stress response. And so a toddler tantrum is actually an overwhelm of stress in a child's body, and this big sort of hormonal surge. And it made, suddenly my parenting became so much easier. I understood what was going on for my children in their moments of overwhelm. And there was this switch, this light that went on, and I thought, wow, everyone needs to know this, because where we've in the past seen children as naughty or whatever, actually no, they're just in the middle of a massive stress response, and here's how we can help. And in fact, it's really important that we help, because if a child is left with this constant state of stress, this internal stress, it's not great for us in the future, and it's certainly not great for a child in the here and now. So I went off and retrained, and I did it. I was still working in the newsroom, but I was doing a 1-day-a-week course as a sort of foundation course to retrain, and I started getting my different levels and working my way up, and it was just heaven. That was it for me. So I've loved my career, and the journalism I've still got my journalism hat on, because I'm using that in my research and how I then convey that. So I'm very grateful for that skill, but actually what I'm doing in the therapy room and when I'm working clinically it's just my happy place. And so seeing the results, seeing how quickly children can heal, even when they have complex trauma, helping parents and supporting parents who may have just been at the depths of despair very often, and actually working with them and showing them how they are the answers to their child, what their child's need, that their children need, and empowering parents actually, and supporting them and working alongside is just been the greatest gift. And it's been a gift for my own children in terms of what I can offer them. So yeah, everything has just come this wonderful full circle. I love the work that I'm doing. And the second book, There's Still No Such Thing as Naughty, which is for 5 to 12-year-olds or parents of. Again, I look at the science, explain the science, and really I just want to help parents to parent the way that they have always wanted to parent, but actually when life, as we know, can get in the way and we're operating at a speed now that is not conducive for our own stress levels, how can we help ourselves in that moment? And so I'm fascinated and have done a little bit of research, quite a bit of research, but how trauma manifests later in life. And that's whether it's a big T trauma or a little T trauma. And how that can actually manifest and appear helpfully right at the moment when we're going into menopause. So, we know that estrogen can be a brilliant buffer for the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is regulating our stress response. So we all have that. It's a very normal, natural, brilliant response. But if it's what we now know is that if the HPA axis, if your stress response is constantly getting triggered when you're younger, maybe your parents are having an acrimonious divorce, maybe you're living in an environment that doesn't feel safe, maybe there's abuse, so there can be big T traumas like that, but there can also be small T traumas that so often happen in everyday life that I'd like to raise awareness of for children and their parents, that we need to help. Our stress response is normal and natural, but it triggers a big hormonal surge, but our bodies then need to come back to balance. So it's not that any of us are not going to have adversity in our lives. All of us are. We're all going to have fear at some point. We're all going to have stress and anxiety. But the point is we need to then come back to balance. And so what we now know is that people who have experienced chronic stress when they were very young, it can show itself in later life. And we sort of might think of the menopause as being a magnifying glass for the nervous system. So my estrogen levels may well be then dropping through the floor. And whereas before that was a sort of a buffer for my dysregulation when I was younger, when that goes through the floor, suddenly the old traumas can start to sort of resurface. And this is science. There's a lot of huge amount of evidence in this regard. So it's a really interesting link for me between the menopause and trauma symptoms. So sometimes and I'm very mindful of it because I experienced significant trauma as a child and had complex PTSD. So I've been very aware on my own journey of looking at where are my estrogen levels, but equally then I also know how I can support myself that it's not just the menopause that might be giving me certain symptoms. Now I've come through my journey, but I think I'd love for anyone listening who this may be resonating with to sort of think, oh, okay, yeah, I had a bit of stuff going on. I had a challenging childhood, or there may have been things, a parent with addiction or early childhood bereavement, any number of things can be triggers. And it's not to say that that's the end point. But what we now know is that in addition to having support for menopausal symptoms, actually, you mentioned the lifestyle. So going out in community, your relationships, dancing, singing, yoga, all the things that we know are great for wellness actually are really, really important for helping our nervous system to come back to balance, particularly in this really quite vulnerable period when we're going through the menopause as well. So there might be anybody thinking, right, well, I've got my patches on and it's not working. It's still not working. I'm still feeling really anxious. Okay, all right. Well, you've got the menopausal side. That's great. You know that your hormones are now being supported. You're being supported. But there may be other things, and that's where therapy can come into play. Lots of wonderful things that we have now working with trauma-informed therapists, but also the value of community, the value of womanhood, talking to our friends. There's a great healing that can come with that. So it's not to be left in a place of fear of, oh God, I've got to relive that whole. You don't. But just be aware that maybe you might still be feeling a bit anxious. Don't think there's something wrong with you, that you've failed the menopause test. You're the only one that it didn't work for. Actually, it just might we need additional help. Our bodies are experiencing chronic stress, not through anyone's fault, just through life being what it is right now. for many, many people, but recognizing the impact that that is having on your physiological as well as your psychological state. It's too much. So I also appreciate that it's like, well, where do I find the time? So it's just creating the space very often. And for me, even getting up half an hour before everybody else and going and sitting in the garden, walking, stroking the dog, taking the dog for a walk. But just being aware of being conscious about what we're doing, I think can be quite empowering in that regard.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we definitely need a rethink, don't we? I don't think that modern society can kind of carry on the way it's going. The people that are off with anxiety and depression, and it is just madness, isn't it?
And depression is just that. It's like a repression of our feelings. We've been sitting on our feelings because we haven't had the capacity to feel, because we've been doing it all, chef, driver, secretary, we are wearing all the hats.
5 sports matches at the weekend.
Yeah, and then your estrogen levels drop and you've got no buffer. There is no place to hide anymore. And it all comes flooding in. And then we think there's something. No, it's not us who's wrong. It's the environment. And it's figuring out where we can. And I will rebel. That school admin. Actually, no, sometimes it's too much. I am not doing homework with my child. We'll sit and read a book and we'll chat. We've got to push back a little bit and say, no, everyone, it's bonkers to be doing this. It's bonkers for our children. They need to be playing more. That's brilliant for brain growth. There's just too much. And I think together, I'm finding myself in this space. I mean, this is why our lunch was so lovely. And I was out last night with girlfriends, 2 of whom, Dame Kelly Holmes and Rosie Nixon, who've both spoken to you. In fact, that's how we got introduced. And is really finding the value in sisterhood, in friendship, and making the most of each other and taking that time out. That's what our ancestors would have been doing for a reason. Yeah. And if you were having a rubbish day and the kids were all around, and I'd be saying, hey, just send them over to me, and that's how it should be. We were talking about if we go on holiday, there's a reason. I love camping, and there's a reason why when you go on a camping holiday and all the kids just run off, you don't see them, and suddenly you go, oh, I can quite enjoy the next 10 minutes. Like I can chat to another adult rather than that whole pressurized. So sometimes we think it's just us and our kids. Actually, no, in community, things get a little bit easier. I get my elderly neighbours over for a cup of tea. We all benefit from it. Yeah. And I was hosting a conference in Glasgow last week called The Biology of Belonging. And there are some incredible people, may recognise the names of Daniel Siegel, Dr. Dick Schwartz, Gordon Neufeld, these incredible gods in the field, Claudia Gold, Darshan Navais. And all of them were saying the same thing. They're big scientists. They've done loads of research, got big brains, and they're going, ultimately, it comes back to relationships. Yeah. And we need what Gordon Neufeld talks about as a vertical society where we've got the grandparents and the elders supporting us, and we're able to then support the adolescents who can then also support our kids, because kids need to learn from older children, not just us. There's a lovely socializing force and a buffer that comes when we live in community. So another thing, I put notes through people's doors. I've just moved to new area, and if I see someone's got a goalie garden in their garden, I'll go, I've got kids, they love football. Do you want to meet up? Yeah. I think it's just obviously safeguarding and all the rest of it. But
just
you're not just going to leave your kids with total strangers. But that person will then come back and go, oh, that's great.
I bet this is where menopause research heads in the next couple of decades, because it's just got to be more than just the hormone.
Well, I'll share one with you because I was just looking, and it's astonishing to me. So much research is already there, but there's a wonderful one which does look at sort of trauma and menopause combined, and it's a really good paper, and it's calling for really greater awareness among clinicians, because they're saying that women with early trauma may experience amplified menopausal symptoms and need more, not less support. But the problem is, if you have had trauma, you may be less likely to access services or be offered HRT, because maybe a bit like me, if you've got a trauma history, you might have a mistrust of medical systems. You might normalize distress. Yeah. So if you've been through distressing times when you were younger and maybe you weren't heard, it becomes normal to then suppress those feelings. So we're less likely to ask for help. And then there may be sort of a stigma and a shame. And I'm just trying to find the paper. But you know, when it was written, 2006.
Really?
And you just, Morrison, MF et al., Menopause. And it looks at childhood trauma and menopausal symptoms. And that's 2006.
Amazing. I'm going to look that up. Yeah. So do you have like one piece of advice for anybody listening who's experiencing menopause and maybe has a history of trauma, or they feel like there's more to their menopause than just the menopause, if you see what I mean?
That's a great question. I think the main thing I would leave anybody with is that asking for help. And it can feel very, very overwhelming when we've got that sort of soup of menopausal symptoms, and also maybe because now we've got maybe sort of past trauma symptoms coming into the fore because of low estrogen levels. It can feel really overwhelming. So first of all, bring that awareness to it and think, okay, first of all, you're not alone. And if I can get anything from this podcast, it's to really let you know that. Asking for help is a strength. It's the brave people who ask for help. Check out Naomi and all of the work that you're doing, you know, and find good people around you to make sure that you're medically supported. And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself if you're going to your GP and really say, I still don't feel well. Can we explore other areas? And then that last bit of the jigsaw for me is to think of it maybe as a puzzle and think we're all puzzles, and there might be just bits that feel like they're missing right now, but trust me when I say they are out there, those bits, and it can just be quite a nice challenge of finding where those last few bits of the puzzle might be. It takes a bit of work sometimes, it takes a bit of effort, but I do find that asking for help is the first best step. I have to remind myself that still.
Where would be a good place to ask?
So I think on websites like the BACP or UKCP, putting your postcode in, looking for trauma-informed practitioners. There are brilliant books out there. And I would look at Internal Family Systems by Dr. Richard Schwartz. Is a really good, lovely, lovely way of helping us to understand ourselves and ourselves. In terms of our past history. But anything that you look at that's trauma-informed, a very good friend of mine is Dr. Gabor Mate, who does a lot of work in this field, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Deb Dana, Stephen Porges. My books, to be honest, a lot of parents will say to me, because they're very big brains and they do talk in very long sentences. And I'm not saying this to sell my books, but my books distill the science. And I have had a lot of parents say to me, is it right that it's helped me as much as it's helped my kids? And I'm like, yes, I wrote it for you because I've written it for me, you know, in understanding myself. So I think when we start to understand the science and the neurobiology and the neuroscience behind behavior and how we're feeling, suddenly that light bulb can go on and you think, that's why I do that, or that's maybe why I'm feeling that way. So I have written my books as much for parents as adults as I have for their children. But type in, go gently, treat yourself gently and with compassion, and as I say, know that you're not alone.
That's one of the biggest things, isn't it? Just being kind. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but being kind to yourself and just being forgiving of yourself, because we just, you know, you see images of like perceived perfection everywhere, like people that look perfect, they've got perfect houses, perfect jobs, perfect children, perfect everything, but it's
no
never
such thing. I mean, this is
never
it.
Like
I
that,
say as much
it?
as there's no such thing as naughty, there's no such thing as perfect, and nor should any of us be striving to be. It doesn't exist, and it's a pretty miserable place to try to hold ourselves account for that. But you know, it's a long journey. It's that self-acceptance, but every journey starts with a single step. And anyway, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that, because I haven't done that before. So.
Have you not?
No, I haven't. So thank you for that. You've opened the space to sort of sit.
I think it's fascinating. I think that there's just so much to be said for it, and because it's not kind of a traditional medicine, not traditional healing, but kind of Western healing, where you go along, you're given a drug, you go away, you're better. But it's what's broken is how we live, isn't it?
And also, you know, we're given pills, the menopause aside, but, you know, there are pills that will help us not to feel.
Yeah.
And yet there's no pill that helps us to feel. And that's where we need to get to, is I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling joyful, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling cross. And once we start giving ourselves permission to feel, we can, all our feelings are valid. You know, when I'm in the therapy room with children and I say to them, we're going to invite all our emotions in here. And they look at me and they go, what, even anger? And I go, especially anger. Because it's not anger that we need to be afraid of. It's as if we're not able to express it safely.
So we have some questions sent in from the audience. The first question is from Claire. I would love some advice on how to manage menopausal rage alongside raising an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old. As my perimenopause has got worse, so have the unnecessary fights with my kids. I don't want to look back on their childhood and think of me as an angry person. I don't want them to look back on their childhood and think of me as an angry person. But that's the way it's been lately. What can I do to manage the rage medically and to make my home a peaceful place again?
So you're going to do the medical bit.
Yeah, I mean, managing rage medically, I mean, that's really mood swings and the first, well, you would look at it holistically. So you would think, what is it in your lifestyle that what changes can you make? Are you so angry that because you're completely overwhelmed, you're working a full-time job, you've got kids to look after, you've got a house to run, you've just got no more fuel in the tank? Are you self-medicating with coffee and with alcohol and not exercising? So looking at all of those kind of things can make a massive difference. As cliched as it sounds, they really can. And also HRT, restoring estrogen, if it's something that you would be interested in trying, can also make a really big difference. So I think it's looking at the whole picture. HRT on its own, is it going to fix this? Probably not. Lifestyle on its own, is it going to fix it? Maybe, but estrogen certainly can help. And so it's just kind of puzzling it, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah. And I would do all of those absolutely as a starting point. Also be forgiving of yourself. And I think this is where that regulation comes in, because what we want to do is to model to our children that we're not always going to get things right. And then modeling the repair. Guys, I am so sorry that I got that wrong and I shouted, and I am really, really sorry. That's not who I want to be. Mummy's just a bit tired at the moment. You might say, I'm actually going to go to the GP to talk about my hormones, because talking about hormones can be really helpful, particularly for our preteens, because they're going to go through it. So actually talking about how hormones can impact our mood can be a really helpful thing. So that might be something in an age appropriate way. I'm not sure with an 8 and a 15-year-old, you might sort of be on either side of the window. But just knowing how important it is to modelling the repair for your children. I think I'm sort of just picking up on that fear of I don't want them to think of me as that raging. So I think, as Naomi says, first of all, address the potential causes, and then also being mindful of your own regulation. Could you take yourself out in that moment and do what I call it's a quick palm pause, which is putting if you can safely do it with your children if they're older, is putting your hands over your eyes, taking a step out of the room before you lose it, what I call going into baboon. Put your hands over your eyes. Big deep breath. And that can be just enough to buy you that little bit of time to engage the prefrontal cortex, what I visualize as your wise owl, to go in a little bit calmer. And when you're modeling that for your children, you're doing something very valuable, because they're going to lose their rag on occasion and be dysregulated, and just showing them that we're all going to get dysregulated, especially when we're under pressure and we're tired and all the rest of it, but that we can bring ourselves back to balance. And therefore you're showing them apologizing is never going to do any harm. I'm really sorry, sweethearts, I got that wrong. And that lovely sort of, let's just sit, come on, should we just have a snuggle up at bedtime? Just bringing everyone back to balance can really go a long way. But you don't want to be sitting in that rage the whole time. So that's the first thing to to address, I would say.
Thank you. So we've got one more. And this question is from Letty, who asked, I've developed anxiety during menopause. It's making me feel more distance between myself and my wife and my kids. The things we used to talk about as a family, we no longer do. I think it's because they don't want to add extra worry onto my plate when they can already see that I'm struggling. How can I rebuild our communication?
Again, I think it's that seeking help from somebody who can sort of look at that. I mean, shall I just shut up and let you do the first?
No, because you give a different slant. I say the same thing every week.
I think, but it's that holistic approach, isn't it? It's that one when we understand that when our estrogen drops through the floor, that buffer that we may have had is no longer there. Now, it may be, and actually this is a really important point that I'd like to just introduce, because in psychotherapy, what can happen, I'm not saying it's happening in this case, but it can help us to sort of think about it. If we've had tough times as children, let's say our parents had a really acrimonious divorce when we were 8. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes what can happen is then when our own children turn 8, it can trigger that unresolved. It's what we sort of think of as an implicit memory. It's a bit sort of, it's within us of a difficult time, and it can start or a good one is bullying. So if we were bullied at the age of 12, we might have more anxiety when our children start turning 12. It's an unconscious influence that can be brought to bear later in life. So it does actually happen more commonly than we think. So sometimes it might be so what might be going on for me right now? Is it my hormones? Am I going into the menopause and maybe I want to go and get that blood test and I want to go and speak to my GP? Okay, that's one thing. Now, what about this anxiety? What might my body be telling me? Anxiety is not a mental health condition unless it gets to the point where it's absolutely, of course, debilitating. But anxiety in and of itself is simply your nervous system saying, enough, I need you to stop. It's that little lizard, and it's been going round and round and round in circles, and it's going, I can't take it anymore. So it's going, okay, what is my body telling me? So I can go and get some support, and that may well be it. That may well be it. If that's not where, I'm still in that place of sort of feeling a little bit disconnected, talking to my partner about it, of course, maybe then going and seeking a little bit of therapy. I always, there can be a big fear around going into therapy. Oh, what's it going to reveal? But actually, therapy is a very beautiful process, and it's a gift that we can give ourselves that we can then give to our children. And wouldn't we all really love just a little bit of time each week with someone who can just help us to stop and say, actually, that sounds really hard. That sounds really hard. How can I help? And sometimes it doesn't take very long for us to start feeling we just need to offload a little bit and not feel like we're, moaning because we're finding things tough. And sometimes that can be done within the family unit with our friends, but sometimes we may well want to seek professional support the same way that we would for our menopausal symptoms. And sometimes if we think of it like, if I've sprained my ankle, well, why wouldn't I use a crutch?
It's so true, isn't it?
I don't need to have it for the rest of my life. It's okay. I don't need it. I can tell you I've come through some pretty serious stuff myself. I don't, and you can come out the other side. So if it is just going to be helpful for a few months or a little while, a lot of therapists offer means-tested services as well. So never be afraid to go and ask. There should never be a barrier to seeking.
GPs can refer, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's just that thinking of it. How can I help myself in this? And in doing that, we're going to be helping our family.
Yeah, asking for help. It's not to be. It's not a failing. It's not being weak. It's not
brave. It's quite the opposite. Yeah. And there's a lovely saying. It's sometimes only when we reach rock bottom that we learn how to rock climb.
Oh, I haven't heard that before. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. It is a field I just don't know very much about, and
Well, likewise, it feels like we, as you can tell, but it's lovely, isn't it, coming together and thinking we're so aligned, and and all the benefit for it. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for helping me with all your information and loveliness. And it's been a real pleasure to see you. Thank you.
If I didn't manage to answer your question today, or if you have any other questions, then please feel free to follow me on Instagram. I do a lot of educational posts and videos. My handle there is Dr._Naomi Potter, and hopefully you will find the answers to your questions there. Alternatively, on my website, which is menopausecare.co.uk, there is a big information hub, and you should be able to find your answers there as well.